I am so excited today. We're bringing on Andrew McAfee. He's an inventor, electrician, and also very concerned about your health. He's the inventor of the NCB, and I'm going to bring him on today. But before we do that, let's look at his bio. So Andrew, after developing extreme electrical sensitivity in 2001 due to wiring violations in his home, Andrew embarked on a mission to understand and mitigate EMF exposure. As a former principal horn of the North Carolina Symphony, he's also very talented. He's a musician. His condition made performing increasingly difficult, leading him to transition to teaching at UNC Chapel Hill. In 2017, he fully committed to EMF consulting, helping individuals identify and remediate harmful electrical issues in their homes through his home EMF tracing service. Andrew has trained with some of the nation's leading EMF experts, including Dave Stetzer, Carl Riley, Charles Keene, and Donald Zipes. His studies in electrical theory, home wiring, and code are rooted in Mike Holt electrician courses. He holds a residential electrician's career diploma from Penn Foster, is OSHA 10 certified, and served as a lab leader for the International Institute for Building Biology and Ecology's Advanced Electromagnetic Radiation 302 course. He also earned his honorary certificate of completion for their 206.2 electrical home wiring course. From 2023 to May 2024, Andrew worked professionally full-time as an electrician, servicing the Bonneville Electric in Carrboro, North Carolina, where he achieved the 2,000 primary hours required to test for an electrician's contracting license. His hands-on experience, combined with extensive research, has made him a sought-after expert in EMF mitigation and home electrical safety. A passionate advocate, Andrew spearheaded lobbying efforts that secured a no-fee medical opt-out for Duke Energy smart meters in North Carolina. He continues to educate and empower others to take control of their health by addressing hidden electrical hazards in their homes. In addition to his work in the EMF field, he maintains his love for music by conducting annual performances of the Nutcracker with the Triangle Youth Ballet. This is amazing, Andrew. I'm so glad you can take your time, your busy schedule, and basically come here to help me understand more, as well as the viewers on my channel, and also the people in the Earthing and Grounding Forum, which were close to 50,000 people now. So in a nutshell, can you say why this is important and why are you taking the time to do this?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Dr. Doan, for having me on. It's a real pleasure, and it's an honor working with you. You know, having someone of your caliber and your intelligence that can understand this stuff is that's amazing in itself. So it's interesting what issues are coming up right now in the history of the world with electromagnetic issues, cell phones, Wi-Fi, the power grid, all of our health issues going on right now. Things are really coming together. The health problems that our people are having seem to be very synergistic with the electrical influences around our body. So we'll explore what those are, but I think it's very relevant right now with the times that we're in.
That's awesome. So let's dive right in, okay? So this is the invisible stressor. And this is why I'm interested, because I have a master's in public health and I did a lot of studies in toxicology, environmental influences on health, as well as epidemiology. So after talking to Samuel Milheim, who's also an epidemiologist, he opened my eyes to the microsurge electrical pollution, also known as dirty electricity, and how that affects human health. So in your opinion, many people struggle with chronic stress and inflammation without knowing the root cause. And I see that in my clinical practice as well. So how do electrical fields in our homes contribute to that inflammation?
Wow. So, all right, you jumped right into the deep end of the pool. I'll give the quick answer. House wiring, except for Chicago, is unshielded. There's no metal container around the wiring. So the electric fields just jump off the wires onto people and charge our bodies up. So the first problem that we need to look at are electric fields in homes. It's correct. It's by code. It's wired correctly, but there is no sheath around the wires that contain the electric field. Chicago has a code that says that has to have a metallic covering, and they don't have the electric field problems. They have magnetic field problems. So the first thing we have to talk about is home wiring, electric fields first.
Gotcha. So let's jump right in. So what types of electric fields and frequencies do we see in our U.S. homes?
Right. So in America, we have something called 60 hertz sine wave. Basically, it's alternating current back and forth. Front and back of the movement of electrons is one cycle. So pulse 60 times a second. So 60 times a second is 60 hertz. Hertz. Hertz is a guy that came up with the whole phenomenon of. Anyway, so we have power line frequencies of 60 hertz. Those create an electric field. Riding in that wave, there are other higher frequencies called dirty electricity. And that's what Sam Milham has talked about, and Dave Stetzer has done groundbreaking research on to illuminate, also Magda Havas, of the health problems. And she has videos and other types of really good documentation where people get rid of this dirty electricity, or these high frequencies in electric fields. Their MS and their Parkinson's and all these other symptoms of these horrible diseases dissipate or reduce. So there's a direct causative factor of dirty electricity, but that's the second part of the problem. The first problem is we have an electric field being broadcast that we have to remove, and then there's no dirty electricity.
That's powerful. And it's amazing because I have a lot of inflammation in my clinic. I'm an ophthalmologist by training. However, we do have like eye inflammation, and I have people that I can't explain their inflammation. There's no root cause, and we just call it idiopathic and give them steroids for the rest of their life. But I had a couple who listened to me about, mitigating and trying to reduce their electrical exposure. They actually use earthing and grounding, but they grounded, outside naturally, not with the outlet. And we're going to talk about that later. Their inflammation actually disappeared in 2 weeks, and they stopped using their steroid drops. And I was just amazed. And that's what got me so excited, and also motivated me to look into this more and talk to people like you who are experts in the field and understand this electrical phenomenon. And I think truly, I'm a doctor, you're an electrician, you're studying to be, higher levels of electrical knowledge. We're the Andrew Squared team. And I think this is very exciting. Andrew Squared, you have like an MD and a PhD, and then also an electrician coming together to understand this, help people get better. And you were affected too. So you can go into a little bit about how you and your wife were affected by this inflammation, and what did you do to mitigate?
We were both very young and good looking and strong people when we first were married in 2000, and we moved into a brand new home thinking it was wired perfectly, and within 6 months we had some very serious symptoms: dark circles under our eyes, mood swings at 5 to 7 p.m. every day. It's like we had this heaviness come over us, and the power grid would kick in. And little by little, getting professionals to come in, we finally figured out there were all kinds of wiring problems. So we're causing, these symptoms, literally current crawling all over our body, the electric fields and magnetic fields, as well as a cell phone tower and radio tower across the street. So it was a long time to get us psychologically over the hurdle of, our cell phones are giving us a headache. I can feel the cell phone tower going by me. So our bodies woke us up. And this is the important point I want everybody to get today. Electrical sensitivity, or I call electrical sentience, is an awareness the body is helping us become conscious of the danger. So if you start to feel symptoms, thank goodness, that's fabulous. The real crime is those that are dying of cancer, those that are dying of these horrible diseases and never got a wake-up call. They never got an inkling of what was causing it, so they just kept doing it over and over again, and then it's over.
That is crazy. So you sent me some negative health effects that these frequencies can cause, right? So at high levels, it's direct burns and free radical damage. It can stop your heart. And we're not actually talking about that necessarily, because that's obvious, right? You stick your finger in a light socket, you're going to die. But we're talking about like more subtle things that are like killing you long term, such as activating voltage gated ion channels, indirect EMF damages to the blood brain barrier. And you said something about parasites too that are actually thriving when there's certain frequencies. Can you dive into that a little bit? And how do we know that these things are caused by frequencies of electricity?
So it is pretty much my baseline premise that there's a direct relationship between parasites, fungus, mold, Lyme disease, and electrical frequencies and energy. It kind of feeds the growth of these, whatever you want to call them. I just call them parasites. I lump them all together because basically they're feeding off of us. They use that energy, or they eat our body, they chew on our myelin sheath around our nerves, they eat our blood, whatever it is. I even lump cancer into a parasite because it's feeding off of our body. So how does the electrical energy feed them is the big question. Now, Dr. Sharon Goldberg has done great research and showing that certain windows of frequencies, like a certain speed of oscillation, will enhance the growth of MRSA, will enhance the growth of E. coli. Dr. Klinghart for years has been talking about the explosion of mold around a certain frequency. So in general, if you're doing a therapy for some sort of infection, you will benefit by removing the electric fields, by removing the magnetic fields, getting the cell phone off the body, getting the Wi-Fi turned off, because your body will not be, one, immune compromised by the energy. So the energy does two things. It shuts down your immune system. Mold does that too, and Lyme disease shut down your immune system. And it also enhances your ability to fight the infection. So double-edged sword here, but in all cases, your therapies will be better if you get rid of all of this energy. And we need to talk about how electric fields work and why grounding works eventually.
Yeah, that's really good. And for you, what did you do to mitigate your health problems in your home? Like, what did you do exactly, and how long did it take for you to feel better?
When we had Charles Keene, the EMF specialist, first come in, and he had found the wiring problems, and we had electricians come in and fix the wiring and problems in the home. But by that time, our bodies had become sensitized. And it didn't matter if the wires were correctly wired or not. Just having the electric fields radiate off of normal wiring was enough to make us feel bad. And plus, you have dirty electricity. We didn't know how to filter anything. So it took us, we moved out of that home in 2 years to another home. And then I still felt bad because I had, I could feel cell towers a couple of miles away. And I put up shielding on my walls, copper paint and things like that. And I didn't realize about grounding current on the walls yet. So I was feeling results from that. So we moved again after we lived in an apartment for a while to my existing house. And then I learned more about wiring. So we're talking 6 to 8 years now of dealing with, I feel like hell. And I'm trying to fix wiring problems, but I'm learning more deeper wiring problems exist that are causing electric fields. I'm going through all kinds of detox therapies. I did a very aggressive EDTA chelation that made an explosion of fungal infections out of me. It's like, well, I didn't expect that, and I did my doctor. And all kinds of other types of, I was trying grounding mats at the time, and all kinds of shielding. And you name it. I had gone to a neurologist to try to figure out, do I have some sort of neurological problem? He said, I just need to go to a behavioral therapist. He didn't know anything about that. But it was funny in the office. He goes, well, my parents live next to a power station, and they're having all kinds of headaches and all kinds of health problems. You think it's related? So anyway, it starts to get people starting to think, if you come in and they're very defensive because they don't know anything about what you're talking about, but then they start clicking together. Oh my God, I can see how this happens, but I don't even want to talk about it because that opens a whole can of worms.
You are absolutely right. And I just want to go back to, talking about how voltage in the body and current in the body affects voltage gated ion channels. So our entire body, the electrical signaling in our bodies through our neurons and brain, it's not like an electrical wire. It's actually through saltatory conductance, where we have ion channels and they open up in response to voltage, and those influx of sodium, potassium, also down the road, calcium controls neuronal signaling. But 30 millivolts of energy at microamps of current is required. That's all it takes to open up those channels. And so if you're living next to a substation or power lines, or your home is not wired correctly with shielded wires, you're opening up and closing channels all over your body, and you can get variable results. We don't know exactly what will happen because each individual is different, but that's what's going on in the body. One of the things that goes on in the body.
Yes. So there are different levels of harm caused by different influences. One's by contact. If you're actually touching something, more can be induced into bodies, much more dangerous, rather than radiated, it's just flying through the air. So what I'd like to do now is share a screen and educate those that are able to watch the properties of an electric field, and then how this actually acts upon the voltage gated calcium channels, or acts upon the skin of the bodies. I really encourage everyone to watch. I think it's really colorful and has good music in it, and it's really immersive for people to really dig in deep to this. But what I want to explain first of all is electric fields and how these little strands come out and how they interact. So with electric fields, and I want to show you a little tiny bar magnet here. There's a north pole to the bar magnet and a south pole to the bar magnet. And there's energy that reaches out from each one of them. And you notice that they cling to each other. So this is a nice representation of opposite poles attracted to each other. Now, in this little graphic here, you can see that the plus charges are reaching towards the negative charges. And they like each other. So the opposite charges attract to each other. But if you have the same charge, they will repel from each other. And this is a really important point. And as we go forward, I'm going to show this little tiny video here from my presentation of these charges getting influenced by an electric field.
Are repelled from each other.
So you may be able to hear me talking through the
Positive
video
charges
here.
will push each other away. The same with two negative charges. They will repel each other. An electric field has a negatively charged end and a positively charged end. Any charges inside that field will be attracted or pushed. An electron is negatively charged, so will be attracted to the positive pole and pushed away from the negative end of the field. If the field is strong enough, it can move the electron out of its orbit. The actual movement of the charges creates a brand new phenomenon, a magnetic field.
So that's enough to start our conversation. When you have this electric field, it's called a gradient. It's high pressure to low pressure. So things move from high pressure to low pressure, much like water does. And if you have charges in that field, like an electron on your atom or whatever it is on a molecule, it will be dragged or pushed or sucked by this external electric field in this polarity. And the actual movement creates magnetic fields. So let's separate this out. You can just have a field, an electric field, and no movement of charges. It's just pushing on things. It's influencing an environment, which is not good. But if you have it strong enough, you have a new phenomenon. You can actually rip the electron off of whatever it is and move that electron, and that creates another new magnetic field. So we're getting now into magnetic field. So let's just talk about the electric field first.
Wow. Yeah. So tell us how an electric field can open up those ion channels.
So let's jump ahead to, let me see if I have it right here. This is a small video of current.
It's an electric field. Here's a description of AC, or alternating current. It alternates, so the electrons are pushed and pulled back and forth, and that creates current and a magnetic field.
So you notice with AC, now we're talking about man-made energy. It alternates back and forth, and the literal definition of current is the movement of these electrons off of an atom, and they move. So in your body, if you are touching two things on your left hand, right hand, or your hand to foot, and you set up an electric field across these 2 points, everything in between is going to be pushed and pulled on, and you have the potential for current to be flowing through your body. And this is the most dangerous environment that you can subject yourself, is direct contact and energy moving directly through your body through contact. And then you have these charges that are being ripped and pulled. So you have a voltage gradient in your body, and you already had said, well, if you have a certain voltage gradient inside your body, it's going to activate these voltage gated calcium channels or sodium channels or ion channels and all these other types of things. So again, we're going to be talking about the bar magnet at the substation, or excuse me, at the power plant, is rotating. It has a north pole and then a south pole, and this is flipping. So you can tell that the north pole is positive. It will attract the electrons towards it. And another way to show you this, I have this very cool little video. How does a transformer work? And I'll get back to you in just a second, but I want just to draw this baseline understanding that if you have this magnet spinning over here and you have wires around it, it's going to push and pull the electrons according to the flipping of the pole. The north pole is positive. It will attract the negative ions towards, or negative electrons towards it. And then when the south pole gets up there, it'll push the electrons away. And this is what it looks like.
Alternation means that the current reaches its maximum and minimum point during the cycle.
So you can see that this is spinning here, and the electrons move and they go back and forth. So this is what's happening in our wiring in our home, is we have energy moving, and that creates a magnetic field when charges are actually moving. But what I want everybody to see inside your home is you have this pulsing of energy. Every time the charges go forward and then they go backwards, you have this pulsing of energy. And this pulsing of energy is quite dangerous to our human body. And this happens, 60 times a second around us, and it pulses towards us in a field around us. And if it's strong enough, that energy can actually go inside of the body. But usually the electric field only will cling to the surface of our body and not go internal unless we are touching something. If we touch something, the environment becomes more potently, exponentially more dangerous, because by contact, we have a different principle that starts to be enacted. It's called conduction. And through that conduction, and that's why we're talking about grounding mats and grounding, is the reason that grounding mats have the potential to be so dangerous. If you have current on your grounding system, which everybody does, and you're touching something, this energy can be pulsed directly into your body to activate the calcium J's or the channels. So we're talking about radiated versus conducted. So I want to focus on conducted, because the radiated stuff just basically will cling mostly just to the surfaces of your skin, unless you have a really violent, hard, lots of voltage and, other situations.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you're absolutely right. Every grounding system or outlet ground will have some type of current, because it's made to basically draw the extra current from the electrical system to the earth. And so I measured recently that I have 92 microamps of current through my outlet ground. And so, it's important to say that, yes, grounding mats with the outlet ground can potentially be dangerous, but there's an alternative. You can use a grounding rod outside, which then has no current at all. So this contact current that Andrew is referring to is actually potentially very harmful because of this whole pulsing energy, especially with the electrical system, and also having direct contact. The amps, the current can actually go through the body, into the body.
Yes, and we have to talk briefly about how the power grid is established. And unfortunately, the return current wire on the power grid is stuck into the earth everywhere. So this connection to the earth in the transformer and then into our homes is it's normal practice, but it's the only place in all of electrical engineering that anyone's allowed to ground the return current wire. It's a current carrying conductor. It gets stuck into the earth. It gets pushed, it gets attached to things that humans touch. This is insane, but it's how the power company has learned to save money, because if they ground everything, it reduces the stress upon their equipment. Now, they've been doing this for 75, 80 years or more, and they're not going to change anytime soon because they've been saving a gobload of money. They haven't had to upgrade their equipment. But in the meantime, we have to learn, and this is what I go through in my present grid presentation, is learning how this current flows into our home, flows into the earth, flows into our grounding system. And if we attach our body or grounding mats, anything to the electrical equipment or the equipment grounding conductor or the ground prong of an outlet, you are touching the grid directly. There's nothing standing between that grounding conductor and the neutral return current on the pathway. You are bare naked to the wide open dangers of the power grid.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I often say that we have human grade saline and medications and syringes and instruments, right? But we don't have human grade grounding points for grounding mats. And so people just assume that all outlets are safe, and they're literally plugging in, as you said, Andrew, to the electrical system that is made for electrical equipment. So let's jump into, unless you want to talk about this slide real quick, but I want you to talk about the NCB. Because you're not against grounding mats. You're not against using a grounding mat with an outlet, because obviously, there's an outlet prong for a grounding mat there. So what is the NCB, and what made you create this, invent this?
Well, originally the NCB was kind of a desperate attempt to fix a horrible situation that I had created for myself. So inside my home, I had put up copper paint on my most recent house. I thought I was really smart, 12 or 13 years ago. When we first moved in, I copper painted the whole walls in my bedroom to make sure that, the radio frequencies wouldn't come in and we'd be safe. Well, you're required to ground all that copper, because it's very dangerous to have a whole bunch of copper in your house without it being grounded to your electrical system, because things will jump and spark and arc. So it was always creating an electric field and some sort of energy that was burning our face. And my wife and I were trying to have children at the time, and I believe it was causing all kinds of feminine issues for my wife. And after 10 years, we ripped the walls out. I couldn't make it work. I had, the nation's best biologist come in and try to figure out the grounding, and nothing would work. So out of that, I was so frustrated that I developed the NCB of how to filter and stop current on grounding systems. And this is one of the latest models that we have, is you actually don't have to open it up, but you have a hole in the front that you can actually adjust the resistor. So it becomes much more easier for people, rather than having to open it up to adjust the dial. You can actually do it from the outside. So this is basically the plug version. And it is good for if you're going to be plugging in a grounding mat or shielding paint or whatever it is to an outlet, then you can control this influence of current. There's surges every day on the power grid that will come into your system, or just noise on the grounding system, and you can choke and filter it.
I love it. So I tested out yesterday, and I'm going to show a clip here in the video as I talk, but I was able to measure 90 something microamps of stray electricity from the ground. This is the ground wire. And so contact current like that over time can lead to problems. And Dr. Samuel Milheim literally said, quote, "It will shorten your life," unquote, if you plug into the wall, right? Because it's associated with leukemias, cancers, melanomas. There's tumor specific frequencies, as well as depression, anxiety, and all these other health problems. So I plug in the NCB into the outlet, and then it has an adjustable resistor.
This is a demonstration video to show how dangerous or potentially harmful to use an outlet to ground if there are stray currents. So to check for stray currents, I use this banana clip connected to the red lead of this multimeter set on microamps AC. As you can see, this multimeter is measuring about 80 microamps of AC current, anything as much as 1 microamp of contact current. So contact current is current that comes in contact with the human body, can lead to adverse health and other issues such as cancer and other illnesses. This is an NCB from Shield Your Body. I'm going to show that it actually reduces the stray currents in the ground and also makes it safer for you to ground from your home outlet. So this NCB is able to reduce the current to 0, an adjustable resistor, so that you can actually change the resistance. So it's been shown that in order to ground effectively, 500K ohms or less is needed for grounding. So if I turn it all the way to the left here, you can see that the amount of stray current is now around 60 microamps, which is similar to unfiltered. But as I crank this up all the way to the right, it goes to 0. We want no current through the ground, but we want low resistance so that we can actually ground from the outlet effectively. We're going to set on AC volts, and you can see when I pinch this red lead, my body shows that I have about 1.7 volts alternating current. I ground my body and it goes down to 125, 116 millivolts AC.
This is the first device that I've seen on the market that basically allows people to do this. So for those who are living in apartments, those who are living in homes where they can't ground with a grounding rod outside, those who don't want to use a grounding rod outside, the NCB is your solution. I am very impressed by it, and great job, Andrew, for cracking the code on this.
Thank you very much. And the real key takeaway of this is, yes, you're right. They live in an apartment or something. You can't rip out all the wires. You can't put MC cable, or you can't turn off the power to your neighbor's wiring on your wall of your bed or whatever it is. So you have this electric field phenomenon. So these electric fields are jumping out onto you and they're clinging to you and they're charging you up like a battery. So if you can provide another way that this electric fields will jump onto something else, maybe you'll have a canopy, or maybe you have a grounding mat just on the headboard of your wall, or some bed sheets or something that's absorbing the energy that's leaping up towards you from below, you can actually adjust the dial to bleed away just enough of that energy, but not allow this current to be flowing through you. So you're going to find the sweet spot. You're exactly right.
Yeah, I'll show a clip of that too, because you actually use an EMF meter between someone's legs to show how to bleed off that basically how to shut off that current, but also bleed off as much EMF as much as possible. But don't, the sweet spot is to stop current, but bleed off enough EMF. And I'll put that video up on here.
Thank you. That's the key, is we have to talk about electric fields. The electric fields are jumping onto the body, and that's the problem. How do you get the electric field off your body or bled away from your body so it's not charging you like a battery? So we have to look at the electric field. Now, this is very complex. And I have to just say right off the bat, that's why there's so much confusion about this, is do you do a contact voltage measurement, or do you do a radiated? You have a meter that's just telling everything in the air. And I prefer the radiated because, we want to find, is there a push and a pull between my body and other surfaces in this building, or have I been able to reduce that push pull on my body so I feel healthier, or I'm getting the actual benefits of lower electric fields, which is less inflammation, less headaches, less irritation, glucose spikes go down, all these other kinds of things. So I have to focus on the electric field.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned glucose spikes. So when I talked to Dr. Milheim, I was really impressed that he said that dirty electricity and all these EMF issues can be associated with diabetes. There's a third form of diabetes, which is associated with electrosensitivity or electrical pollution in the environment.
Yes, the way that the energy pushes and pulls on the skin of the body, and when you're making contact through the body, is quite complex. But just to summarize, we had that video earlier of things that are oscillating 60 times a second, and they're pushing and pulling on charges inside the body. To me, the most harm you can do to your body is current through these two contact points. And I liken it to ionizing radiation, because what is ionizing? Ionizing is literally the change of an atom's charge. By ripping a charge off of it, you have ionized it. So it could be just in a long chain of things. Magnesium and calcium are even more susceptible than copper is. The amount of energy it takes to remove the outer electron on calcium and magnesium is less energy than actual copper. So the potential for ripping chemicals, molecules inside the body is very dangerous, one, and that's the most dangerous thing we have to deal with. So jumping right to the chase here, if you're going to make contact, surface contact with anything, we have to remove the potential for any current going through the body, period.
That's great. So let's jump into these magnetic fields and code violation issues. So what are parallel neutral currents, and why is it so dangerous that many homes unknowingly have these electrical code violations?
Excellent question. So as we learned from that first video, when you have moving charges, the movement causes the magnetic field. So I'm going to pull up my book, Parallel Magnetic Fields, here, if I can find it. There we go. And I'm going to share my screen. Share screen. So from the book, Parallel Path Magnetic Fields, we already talked about the poles of the magnets and how that pushes and pulls on the wires. And if you go into the home, you need to learn about what the basic wiring is. So you have a black wire that brings the energy to the light bulb. It goes through a little resistor, and then the return current wire, they call it the neutral, or you can just call it the white wire, whichever you want. So what happens is, if you have a certain amount of current coming out on the black wire and it goes through the resistor, it will be the exact same amount of current going back on the white wire, because in the second instance, the fields change. They remember oscillating AC current, everything reverses. So the current is then coming out on the neutral through the load and back on the black wire. So if you have that setup, you are good as far as magnetic fields go. Here's one wire with current flowing on it. You have a certain size of magnetic field. When you have 5 amps coming out on the black wire and 5 amps coming back on the neutral, the magnetic field is canceled. So we're going to use the power of the magnetic field. The strength of 5 amps coming out here is going to be going clockwise. If the energy coming back from the load is 5 amps, it's going to be going clockwise, but in the opposite direction. They will crash into each other, and the overall magnetic field around these wires is virtually canceled. That is dependent upon if you have the same amount of current on this wire and the same strength. But what happens if you don't have the same amount of current on each one of these wires? The magnetic field is not canceled. So what happens is, very common in people's wiring in their home, is they'll have a light switch. And inside this light switch, there'll be 2 different circuits, like 2 different breakers bringing power to this one light switch. And the electrician makes the mistake of tying both the neutrals together. The return current path now has multiple pathways back. So if you have 5 amps coming out on the hot, it splits right here. So if the resistances are the same, you have half of it going on this white wire and half of it going on this white wire. You would now have 2.5 amps here trying to cancel a 5 amp strength magnetic field, it doesn't work. So you have a magnetic field now that's broadcast here. You have another magnetic field that's broadcast here because you have a solitary conductor carrying current that's not canceled, but you have a third phenomenon. This direction and this direction are going in the same direction, and you will have actually coupling of the magnetic field across the entire room. And that's what a large magnetic field, if you go into a house and you have your Gauss meter, your magnetic field meter, and you turn a light switch in the middle of the room, if your magnetic field goes up, you have this wiring problem.
So you're saying that this is against code across the board?
Correct. Now, one of the good things about modern code is they're now requiring ground fault circuit interrupters that test how much current is on the hot and neutral, and if there's any imbalance, it'll trip. So more and more circuits of the house are now being protected by GFCIs, and you can't have this wiring. But a lot of older homes don't have GFCI protection on lighting circuits, and even in modern homes that they're not doing that as much. So you could have this problem and it's not being tripped. Now in receptacles, it's a different deal. It's required to have GFCI.
And what health risks do you see with magnetic fields?
Thank you for asking that. The difference between magnetic fields and electric fields, let me just label a couple. A magnetic field will cut through pretty much anything, except for like a lead coffin. Electric fields lob onto the surface. So magnetic fields cut right through your body. And what that happens is that means the energy of the magnetic field can quickly access what you're calling about the voltage-gated calcium channels, other mediums, your blood flow. You have a vein, and the blood bounces off the walls because, remember, positive repels positive, negative repels negative. So if you have the charges correct on your blood, it's going to bounce off the walls. But what happens if you get sticky blood is because you have the negatives are attracted to the positives. So you have whatever the charges are wrong, and then things start to glob. So the magnetic fields are the first thing I will tell. If I see somebody with some massive inflammation or some heart issues that live next to a power line, I said, look, this is going to be really easy. You go away for a week and you go camping, and I guarantee you that all of these markers are going to change. And it's really easy to show. You just remove your body from the situation. You give yourself about 3 days, and all these symptoms go away.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I walk around. I have a tri-field EMF meter. You know, they're not that expensive. They're about $200. And I'll walk around the neighborhood and just measure the electric and magnetic fields that I encounter. And I have a cell tower, and the radio frequencies go off the chain. But then I have these transformers that literally are around the other side of my house. And I'll walk by, and the meter just screams hot as I'm walking by these transformers, and exactly what you're describing of what these transformers are doing, and it's pulsating at 60 cycles per second of energy out of these huge tin cans on a pole.
Unfortunately, I've had to reveal the problems with a lot of the way that transformers are configured in a neighborhood. My neighborhood's a good example, and I have this in my presentations of the power grid problem of how, remember, the return current wire is stuck into the earth everywhere. So you'll have a loop, basically a circle in your neighborhood made of the transformers, and the return current wire is stuck into the earth everywhere. So what happens is, if you have a house here I should really show the graphic.
Yeah, show it. Yeah, show
presentation.
And then explain how you would mitigate, and explain how would you mitigate the transformer problem. Like, what would be your solution?
Move. I hate dealing with the power company, and so they buck everything all the time, constantly, and they just will not take responsibility for anything. So as we're talking here, I'm pulling up the video here. It's fortunately, you can find neighborhoods that don't have this high magnetic field from the transformers throughout the neighborhood, but you really have to get your own Gauss meter and go walking around the neighborhood to actually find, is this wired okay or not? And there's a picture of a transformer and looking inside it and talking to the power company about this and how this happens. But here's a diagram of a neighborhood, and you have your substation over here, and basically here's the wiring that comes in. So these green boxes are the transformers. So you have energy that comes to this transformer, and then it's distributed to each one of the houses. Now what happens is you have the return current go two different directions. It will go this way and it will go this way. And you can already tell, remember, house wiring has to be canceled. You can only have one return current pathway, and then your magnetic field is canceled. If you have multiple return pathways, you're going to have a magnetic field cast across the entire area. And it gets even much more complicated than this, but these are all your ground return current pathways with everyone's ground rods. You have current in the earth too, being returned. So you have a very complex problem with these transformers being configured with multiple return ground rods. Plus, they all have redundant return pathways rather than a solitary one and back. They will be tied to others to make this loop, and the whole neighborhood has a magnetic field.
Interesting. So I just have a question. So your NCB is made for outlets, but because there is actual current in the ground itself, would you recommend using one of these too if you're using a grounding rod?
If you're going to not use the house grounding system, and let's say you have a canopy around you that's for radio frequencies, and you have an electric field in your home and that's jumping onto your canopy, and you want to bleed it off. So you have an outside ground rod. So the greatest danger from the outside ground rod is if lightning or the power surges, and then the energy comes pulsing right into your canopy and you get fried or whatever it is. So the easiest thing to do is just put a fuse on it. You can, for $8, you can put just basically a fuse that'll burn out. If more than 1 amp of current, whatever comes through that fuse, it'll pop, and then you won't get injured. So that's really cheap. It's $8. LessEMF.com has these little inline fuses you can put in there. But what are you going to do for the rest of the year with energy from the power grid? As you've already seen, there's current in the earth everywhere, pulsing and pushing on this system. Now, a larger problem comes, and it's actually a code violation to have something that is likely to become energized in your home, and you have to bond it to something. You have to attach it to your home electrical system so a breaker will protect you if it becomes energized. So if you have a ground rod outside, it's not associated with your electrical system inside. There's no breaker to turn off. So you have two different systems in your house, and that's why I developed the NCB Pro, which is basically two wires coming out of the end. It's not a plug in the socket, to try to deal with this problem. I go into it in quite some detail in I'm going to share my screen really briefly so people can find out how to find this. If you go into go to the internet and you go to shieldyourbody.com, there is a link on the purchase page for people that have bought the NCB. Is obviously you need to learn, start your learning about, what's really going on. And if I'm going to be doing, a lot of people are saying, well, the home electrical is so dirty, we'll just ground outside, right? Well, then you get into this other problem, and you need to learn about it, because you're going to be talking to an electrician or somebody about this, and they're going, I don't know what you're talking about. And so you have to actually educate yourself and be able to lead the electrician on how to do this. Now, here's the NCB, and we also have the NCB Pro, and this is the one with the wires. So if you click on the link, it takes you to the page, and then down here, you'll see the official installation guide. Now, this is going to give any electrician a headache once you look at this document and go, oh my God. I try to keep it simple. At the front is a very, very simple installation stuff, but I have to put all the warnings in it too, because of technical reasons and everything else. But what I go into is this other problem that we're talking about, is this secondary earth reference point if you have an outside ground rod. And I explain this both in videos as well as in paper here. if you have an outside ground rod and energy hits that and it comes into your house, you're going to have an interaction between your house wiring and the outside wiring, and likely you're going to have some arcing or a fire that's going to be caused. And also you're going to have an exchange of information continually, and you may have a worse situation if your power is on in your bedroom. So the short takeaway is turn the power off in your bedroom to get rid of the electric field, so that there's not an interaction between these two different zones. Your electric fields in your house are going to try to jump out into the earth, and the earth electric fields probably will try to jump into your house. So you need something to work this out. And it gets a little bit complicated, but basically you need to be able to trip a breaker if there's a fault inside your house. So the NCB plug is absolutely essential for any canopies or any shielding paint in the house. But if you're going to have an outside ground reference, you need the NCB Pro to block that outside energy continually from coming in, and you need the dial to be able to adjust reduce the electric fields. But the potential for these two systems to interact in case there's a lightning strike. So it gets very complicated. And that's why I went into videos about this and tried to explain it, is because if you just put a ground rod in the yard, sometimes things will get a lot worse, and you want to understand why.
Very interesting and complicated. But yeah, when it comes down to lightning strikes, that really is a new factor in the equation here. So let's talk about.
And unfortunately, it's hard to interrupt. Unfortunately, there's something called an open neutral on the grid. That's where that return current wire is busted or leaking. So your earth around your home could be very energized, and you might be tapping directly into a source of a problem. So how do you know? You got to do some sort of voltage test, or you have to have some equipment. You can't just blindly just go stick a ground rod in your yard. And I have other videos that talk about dowsing, where you can actually find rivers of current in your yard, and you don't want to be in those rivers of current, and how to redirect those rivers of current, possibly if you want to have a clean grounding space in your backyard.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I have a ground earth resistance meter. It's about $200. They're expensive, but they basically have electrodes throughout the ground, like 2 or 3 electrodes, and it basically allows you to measure the voltage in the ground, if there is any voltage. And you have to measure it because you don't know where this voltage is running. And so you got to pick a spot where the voltage is basically zero.
Yeah, it's what you've done is actually for really intelligent and smart people, because most people just like so yes, there's a simple way, and there's the professional way, and you obviously are quite a smart guy and can do it the professional way.
What's the simple way? Share that with our viewers.
Well, for me, you can just get any continuity tester or any multimeter like you have in your videos, that you put it on continuity, and you basically if there's any resistance is what you want. Or you could do voltage or current. So if you have a really good meter, you can do current. But if you let's just make this simple. If you did a voltage test, you put your black lead into the earth, boom, and you take your red lead and you kind of poke around the black lead. So it's comparing the 2 points. So if the voltage is, it spiked up right here, but then it went down over here. This is probably the easiest way, because most meters are okay voltage wise. Continuity and current is really bad on most meters, unless you buy a Fluke 287. So I would recommend do voltage and just find the lowest voltage point. But even that is not accurate, because then I'm going to spin people with this. You're comparing 2 points. Well, if you had a hot spot here and a hot spot here that are both 200 volts, what's the difference between 200 and 200?
0.
So you have a hot spot here and you have a hot spot here. Your meter says there's 0 volts. And you go, well, oh, this is good. But then you poke it here and at 200 volts, and then it's like 15 volts. So wait a minute, there's higher voltage now between these 2 points. It's like it gets really convoluted. And that's why I don't want people to use voltage with contact, is it spins the brain. You start doing voltage testing in your home, you put the black lead into your outlet, the grounding prong of your outlet, it's going to call whatever that is 0. And your red lead, you're going to poke around, right? It's going to compare it to whatever that black lead is. Well, let's say you have a wiring problem in your house and the neutral is directly touching that ground prong, and you got a whole bunch of voltage on your ground prong, and you're poking around comparing everything else in your room to a live wire. I mean, that's going to kind of spin your brain a little bit. Wait a minute, I thought this was 0. So I don't like doing voltage measurements by contact because it's very complicated, and only experts should really do this because you can get fooled really quickly.
Yeah, the next thing on my wish list that I'm gonna buy is the Fluke 287. That sucker's $600, but I think it's worth it. And you know, I might write some research papers. Maybe we can write some research papers together and publish it. You know, Andrew Squared, you know, some biomedical papers out there. I think this is really important, and especially talking about like even outlets in the ground to refute all the papers that have been published about earthing and grounding using an outlet. Like, we need to raise that awareness at least. I think that's the first paper that's really important to push out there in the biomedical field.
I agree. The premise of voltage has to be erased and replaced with current is the killer. So if you can measure the current directly, you will go instantly to what is the harm. Voltage is an assumption. There could be a potential. If you do allow such and such to occur, you could have this much. So it's safer to do a voltage measurement because you don't want to get fried or killed when you're operating on live systems. But if you're dealing with very, very low voltages and very low current levels, you really need to go to the skin has a resistance. If it's wet, it's practically 0. If it's dry, it's very high. So we need to test what's the actual harm done to a person in the actual situation. When I touch this, how much actually makes it through my entire body? That is very different with the potential for how much could go through my body, because we don't know that other variable. What's the resistance of the body? What's the resistance of it? So it's an incomplete formula. Now, you can use the voltage. Yes, you can, to anticipate potential problems, but where we really have to end up is current is the killer. We need to be measuring current.
So let's talk about current a little bit more. So electrical engineers have argued with me on the internet, my videos, Facebook forum, that, you know, contact current and birds on a wire scenario, that basically, you know, birds can sit on a 10,000 volt power line and they never get shocked. So therefore, a human being who plugs into a outlet ground with current will not get shocked because they are also, or get harmed because the current will go to the earth preferentially, just like, you know, the bird on a wire. It doesn't go through them. What do you say about that?
Exactly. So I'm just going to draw a little tiny diagram here. So here's a wire, and it's got a whole bunch of current and everything. It's very, very, you know, let's say it's sort of there's 1,000 volts on it. Okay. So the little bird, 2 little legs right there, and then you have the body. So if you actually calculate the contact point of this foot and this foot, this is a parallel path. There's plenty of wire here that's really good, carrying all the current and energy on it. So it's not really incentivized to go through the bird. So it touches at these very close little points right here. So, you know, microamps of current will go through the path of the legs, but it's not enough to kill them. They probably like the little voltage jolt. So the difference is, if you have this wire and you actually get close to the ground, because these wires also make contact with the ground, what happens is, if you somehow get involved in what's called the circuit, with energy rotating in a circle, that is where the harm is really done. So you never ever want to become a part of the circuit. Now, there's a very, very huge difference between in series or direct of all of this current going to this circuit and being a part of a parallel where all the current's on the wire, but you could just bleed off just a little bit through the bird. So that the bird on the wire is what's called floating. You are ungrounded. This is where you become a part of the circuit and you are grounded. So if anybody says, well, if you are, here's your receptacle and you have your little ground prong here on the bottom, and if you touch this, all right, so what? Let's say you're a bird on the wire and you're just a little bird here and you're not touching anything else. The energy around this wire can charge up your skin, and it's not a problem. It's just a voltage energy issue. There's no current. Remember, current is the killer. Current is the killer. So there's no current because there's no pathway. He's not in a circuit. He's just floating there in space. But let's say we take one of his legs and we create a pathway through the bird to the earth, and through the earth, and we create it back somehow. So the potential now for this energy to go through the bird is very, very high because we created a path where it can do a circle. Now we have a lot of current, and this guy is grounded. This guy's going to get fried immediately if there's a wiring problem on this grounding conductor. So usually the grounding conductor is not going to have very much voltage, 1 or 2 volts possibly, or even up to 3 volts in some situations, which is not going to be enough to kill anybody. But the problem is there are many, many wire problems in the home where the neutral will be bent up and is touching the grounding conductor inside the receptacle. So if you have any load on that circuit, that hot wire, as I've shown in some of my videos, has 120 volts on it. You can literally, and I show videos where the sinks and the stoves and everything has like 14 milliamps of current on it, and it's live. My voltage sticks are lighting up. And this is very, very unhealthy for people to be around, of course. And they're feeling shocks, they're feeling irritated and everything. And they don't know why until you get an electrician out there and you've got a wiring problem.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize that we're not just talking about lethal electrical shocks. Even if you complete that circuit, if you're part of a circuit, as Andrew mentioned, it leads to basically a slow degradation of your health, because even microamps of current, and actually 1 microamp of current, is enough to cause health problems. That attacks your immune system and over time can cause problems. So yeah, you may not have a seizure, you may not have a heart attack, you may not have electrical shock that's lethal, but if you're constantly connecting to a ground that has some current, that is going to slowly degrade your health over time as you touch the lamp or the table or your bed or your sheets that may have some type of, draw of the current. So current's going to basically leak out of your body, right?
Correct. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands, you could have 1 microamp touch your skin and it does absolutely nothing. What we're trying to quantify here is what the NIEHS, the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, did this report in 1998 and spent $42 million figuring out what the heck was going on. And they found internally, if you have energy inside your skin that's creating a voltage grading of 1 millivolt, that's a thousandth of a volt per meter, that's the length. And what this looks like is if you had a bowling ball up here, 1 volt high, that's the pressure kind of pushing on that bowling ball. If you had current flowing, boom, it hit that pin really hard. 1 millivolt is down here where the little blue is. That's a very, very slow roll of that ball. But internally, that is very dangerous if it can get past your skin. So what we're talking about here is if the energy gets past your skin and there's 1 millivolt per meter voltage gradient, you can induce 1 microamp with 1,000 ohms of resistance of the body. That's a given in the equation. That would be a leukemia and cancer causing condition, according to EPRI. They did the math on this. So the short story is, if the energy gets past the skin, 1 microamp can become a cancer-causing condition over time. Like you said, it's kind of degrades the body, rips the electrons off the body, it creates a voltage channel, the glucose spikes, the parasites grow, everything gets destroyed with this gradient if it gets past your skin.
And this is where research needs to be, done more, right? Because the skin is a good barrier, but you could have a cut on your skin. You could have a break somewhere. You could have cracks because you have some kind of disorder in your skin, like eczema or psoriasis that basically cause a degradation of the skin surface. And also your skin is continuous to your mucosal membrane in your mouth and your eyes. So your skin is not completely protective, especially if the electrical currents are being spread all over the body. It could actually go internal through the mucosal membranes, and the mucosal membranes, your eyes, and also your ears as well. So there are openings that electricity can get inside.
Then we talk about LED lighting and the CYP450 pathway with histamine response, and your skin is an organ of detox, as well as the light sensors and all these other types of absorbers. It gets so in-depth and complicated that everybody kind of goes, oh, look, just forget it. But these energies add up over time. You have cumulative crossing of Wi-Fi cellular frequencies blasting through the body, magnetic fields from the power grid cutting through the body. You have electric fields in your bedroom soaking up into your skin and charging your body like a battery. You have all these cumulative effects over and over again, day after day after day. You're going to get sick.
So let's talk about breaking free and taking control. You say that waking up to this reality is like Neo escaping from the Matrix. What's the first step for somebody ready to reclaim their health and make their home truly safe? And just keep it simple, because all the stuff that we're talking about is extremely complex. Let's just break it down. And What are the first steps?
Turn off the power to your bedroom. How hard is that? You go to the breaker panel, boom. Every night, you go figure out which breaker you need to throw in order so your lamps, and especially the wire at the head of your bed, goes down. Now, it can get a little more complex than that, because if you have power above you and the people start complaining, where's my power? All of that, you get an electrician to come in there and give you some switches so you can control each room at a time. It's not that hard. That's the first thing. The second thing is you don't need Wi-Fi at night. There are great Wi-Fi routers that will, one, be more healthy when they're actually being used, and two, they have timers on them. And three, if you're not using them, they'll go dormant. So your Wi-Fi is one of your biggest killer in your home. And three, your cell phone right on your body is insane. Get your cell phone away from you. Use plastic tubed earphones if you had, or use it always on speakerphone. If you have to have it near your body, you get shielding next to your body, but let it get an easy cell phone signal to the cell phone, so it doesn't cell phone tower, so it doesn't boost up a whole bunch of energy. Don't try to encapsulate it into anything unless you've turned the phone entirely off. These are all very simple things you can do today. Your Wi-Fi on your computer, plug in an Ethernet cord, turn off the Bluetooth, turn off the Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden your mood swings, your irritation, your cream on the top of your life comes back, because all of this energy is burned off by this energy.
That's great advice. Andrew, thank you for taking the time today. And, you spent an hour with me, and I think your knowledge is amazing. And I hope that this video will reach a lot of people and help people understand the severity of what they're dealing with that we call electrical pollution, and just to recap, electrical pollution comes in many forms. There's electrical pollution, which is like EMF, magnetic pollution, which we talked about. We also talked about dirty electricity, which is the micro surge electrical pollution, and then also radio frequencies like Wi-Fi and 5G. So those are the four main types. Andrew, anything you want to talk about before we close?
It's been a pleasure working with you, Dr. Doan, and your clients and your whatever influences you have. People are really, really lucky. I've dealt with a lot of people before. You get this stuff. You understand it on a technical level. People are really lucky to have you, and they should seek you out. And, just blessings to you. You're doing great, great service.
Thank you so much.
If you like this video, please remember to like, share, and comment, and also hit the subscribe button so that you can get all our future videos. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Thank you.